I could outrun every single guy in our unit, but in the infantry officer world, that didn't matter. Being fast does not equal respect. No tab, no value. And I had to live that every single day. There was one particular captain in our unit above and beyond all other captains and officers, because there were definitely others that did this as well, but one that was a true standout. He had the most respect out of anyone basically in the unit. He came from a Ranger battalion. If you didn't have his respect, you didn't get any respect. Not only did you have to have a Ranger tab, but you also had to be a big time weightlifter. So he would run like an infantry officer PT session that was separate from the PT session run by the NCOs in our unit. You would go to a separate gym. There was no running, no cardio. You were doing straight Olympic weightlifting with him, like cleans and deadlifts and all this other stuff. I definitely tried to do that for a bit. Felt like I was pressured into it for sure. Without the tab, I definitely put on quite a bit of pressure on myself to try to prove myself. And I knew that he did not value my skill set, which is that I could run a 2 mile at about a 10-minute pace. And I could run the 5 mile at IBOLIC in Ranger School at about 29 minutes. He didn't care about any of that. You either had a tab or you didn't. And you either went to his session and you lifted a lot of weights in a heavy way, or you didn't. So I showed up to his sessions. And of course, I couldn't lift a lot of weight because I was more of like a runner. So no tab, no respect. And that reputation followed me, and it went through the unit. You know, he started talking about me, and I had a private come up to me on staff duty, and this private literally walked right up to me, and he said, "Lieutenant Johns, why does Captain so-and-so hate you so much?" You know, he literally said that right to my face, you know. And at that point, I already knew that this captain was very much spreading all of this toxic stuff about me in the unit. Now, this made it crystal clear that I actually had a young enlisted soldier literally tell me this is what he said. He literally said in formation that pretty much Lieutenant Johns is a piece of shit. That's what this captain said. And, you know, that's what I was treated. That's how I was treated by a lot of officers in the unit, including others. And I've put out other examples. But this captain, he was the one that really rallied the troops, you know, to really make sure that people like me, if you were an infantry officer and you didn't have a tab, that you really knew that you were worthless. Now, I want to talk about a different point here. The Army never taught me how to fail. The Army never taught me to deal with failure. What I was taught from ROTC going into Infantry Basic Officer Leaders course and ultimately Ranger School is that you either succeed at that course or you are a failure. That is literally what I was taught. And you were basically taught that you will stay there until you get a tab. And if that doesn't happen, you will go back and you will, you know, at that point, try to get your tab. But for me, it didn't work like that because, you know, being a triple no-go in the mountain phase about close to 15 years ago at this point, and then going to Fort Hood and then qualifying again through the pre-Ranger program at Fort Hood and then being called back after the government shutdown of 2013, I didn't get another chance at Fort Hood. Fort Hood is not Fort Bragg or Fort Drum or Fort Campbell. There's not just like slots all over the place. I had to work really, really hard to actually qualify for that one Fort Hood slot. Now, technically, I certainly could have stayed in the Army and gone through Captain's Career Course, because I know, you know, some troll is going to slam down in the comments and be like, oh, you could have just stayed for Captain's Career Course. Yeah, I know. But I didn't want to at that point. You know, I was already taught that I had no value in the Army. And after 5 years, I decided this isn't the right place for me. And why should it be? I'm treated like dirt for 5 years in a row. I'm treated that I'm not even basically a human. I'm treated like a worthless piece of 5 years. Why should I stay there? You guys can go answer it in the comments, especially if you're an Army infantry officer. Go troll me. I literally don't care. What I'm telling you is that I'm a person and I can make my own decisions. And if someone is trying to tell me that I should stay in a culture of hatred and a culture of toxicity, for what? To prove something? To prove that I can get a piece of cloth on my shoulder? I've done things that are much harder than Ranger School. You know, the Spartan Ultra Beast, I'd like to see some of y'all with the tabs come down in the comments and let me know how many of those you've done. 30-mile ultra beast through the mountains of Vermont with 15,000 feet plus elevation and 60 obstacles. It's about 10 times harder than Ranger School. So once you can tell me how many of those you do, then I'll tell you how much I care about your little piece of cloth. Because right now, I really don't care much about it. And I know I'm kind of calling you guys out. You know, I know there's a lot of good Ranger, you know, officers out there, and that's awesome. But I'm speaking to the ones that aren't, because those are the ones that really shined a light on my career when I was in, you know, and they're not all good. I know you good old boys think that you're all good because you got a piece of cloth on your shoulder. You're not. You know, maybe some of you are good officers. I ran into some good officers that had Ranger tabs for sure. But there's a bunch of them that are toxic, like this captain that I was talking about. Moving on to what I was saying, the Army did not teach me how to fail at all. What it taught me is that in the infantry officer culture, I was taught that I had no value and basically that I was weak. So the Army itself, like the big Army, absolutely does have resources to get help. If you have like mental health problems, and I've put this out in other videos when I've been talking about like mental illness and different things, yes, of course they have those types of resources. And if you happen to be listening to this video for whatever reason you think you need help, absolutely, go ahead. I'll even link it in the description. But what I'm telling you is that even though they have doctors, psychologists, resources, and things on paper that you can use, that doesn't mean that it was easily accessible or that it was something that would have been encouraged. Like someone like me, I just wanted to prove myself at that point because I was being told every single day that I'm weak. I was being told every single day that I was worthless by all these toxic officers. So the last thing on my mind was, oh, let me show them that I'm even weaker by going to these doctors or going to these psychologists. Of course I didn't do that. And it's because I was trying to prove that I was not weak. So the Army itself, they might have those resources. The infantry officer culture, you either have a tab or you are literally worthless. And that is exactly what they want to tell you. Moving on to the next point, because we're going forward here. And, you know, I'm focused on what can I accomplish as a human? What can I accomplish? What can I take home from this? Here's what I take home from this. There's a lot of things, really. I know where I stand with my values. I know that I do have leadership capabilities and I do have values that I can bring to organizations. So here's my point one. Treat people with respect. That's what I did when I was a platoon leader, because I did end up getting a platoon. I treated people with respect. Doesn't matter if they have a tab or don't have a tab, or if they have a badge or they have a piece of cloth. None of that matters. When you look someone in the eyes, you treat them with respect. That's how I was taught when I was a kid, and that's what I lived out as an Army officer. So whether you have a tab or not, I encourage you to treat people with respect. And going forward on my own personal journey through life, I'm going to continue to do that. Here's another thing. Point number 2. Accomplishments in the past are just accomplishments in the past. Because you passed Ranger School, okay, cool. Like, are you going to brag about that for the rest of your life? Like, that's a cool accomplishment. Congratulations. You want me to congratulate you every day? Because I literally don't care. Show me what you can do today. Because I ran, you know, an ultra marathon, 50 miles in 2018. Who cares? Nobody cares. That was almost 7 years ago. It doesn't even matter right now. So yes, I'm not just calling out the Ranger tab people. I'm calling out myself. I'm calling out my own accomplishments. The Vermont Ultra Beast Spartan race that I did. Who cares, dude? That was over 7 years ago. What matters is what we do right now, today. How are you going to treat people today? Are you going to treat them with respect? Or are you going to show them the Ranger tab on your shoulder and treat them with disrespect because you think you're better because you have a Ranger tab? I can tell you right now, I'm not going to walk around, you know, where I'm at here in Texas telling people that I'm better than them because I can run faster than them. That's not how I act as a human. And I guess those are the only points I wanted to share in the life lessons. But, you know, going forward, what matters to me is not whether or not someone has either past accomplishments or a tab on their shoulder. It's how do they treat people. That's ultimately what matters. And, you know, whether you're in the Army, not in the Army, have a Ranger tab, don't have a Ranger tab, whatever, or if you just randomly stumbled upon this video, I hope that you take that point out of this, because what really matters in this world is how we treat people. That matters a lot more than accomplishments. And if you made it to this portion of the video, thank you for watching. And you can subscribe for more topics on going through life, mental toughness, mental resiliency, even dealing with mental illness and marathon training and an assortment of other topics. Catch you on the next video.